All right, Mary, I'm handing it over.
All right. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for coming to the new date. We have beautiful weather outside today, so thank you very much. I want to thank Tammy and Jamie also for joining me tonight. So, like Maggie said, I am Mary Thormalin. I am here all in. I just want to tell you guys a little bit about myself before I start with my story. I live in Prophetstown with my husband Jeff and our two children Addison and Cooper. While they're busy at school, I take care of our cows. Now in this picture we have 10, and that's the biggest herd we've had. Right now we have 2. If you see that big white truck out there, I recently needed a new transmission, and the cows had to go. And so don't worry, they are nicely on another farm. They are nobody's dinner tonight, but we just kind of had to start over. But all jokes aside, I really find it therapeutic to have them be out in the pasture with them, to work with them in the barn. I've always had a passion for agriculture, and it brings me a lot of pride and joy and confidence to be able to have my own herd, know what to do, and take care of them. I'm also a very creative person. I love crafting. I am that person you call when you need something made, which is probably why I do so well with Maggie. But I would have to say that my creativity is probably one of my strongest attributes. I would probably say most of people that know me probably would say that. I do want to talk about NAMI for just a second. Like Maggie said, I jumped headfirst into this in December. I said to her, I want to share my story. And since then, I have built so many great relationships and done so much work that it fills my cup. It gives me a purpose outside of being a mom, outside of being a wife, that I myself am able to bring something to the table. I want to thank Maggie, Cheryl, who's not here, all the volunteers and our board members for welcoming me with open arms. I do want to say that my story may have triggering subject matter. Please take advantage of our safe space, which we have an office over there if you need to sit off. I will not at all be offended if you need to get up and take a break. My story is meant to be helpful, not hurtful, but your mental health is important to me as well. I also want you to know that my story is much more detailed than what I'm going to share tonight. So that Q&A cards that you guys have, if you want me to elaborate on any part of it, please do. I also, obviously, I'm using a slideshow. I made the slideshow because I want you guys to see the photos of how I looked throughout my journey, but also the ages of my children during each phase of my journey. So let's get into it. I was born in 1989, but my story really starts in 1993 when my parents divorced when I was only 3 years old. I have no memory of my parents' marriage, but I spent the next 15 years in the middle of a toxic divorce and custody battle. My mom was my custodial parent, so I lived with her, but her and her mother were mentally, physically, and sexually abusive. I don't remember a time when I wasn't depressed. To be honest, because what was happening at home, I had a very healthy social life. My friends brought me a lot of joy. They became my family, which some of them are still in my life today, and I can proudly say are here to support me tonight. Despite my shortcomings at home, I did prosper at school. With my passion in agriculture, I was extremely active in FFA, becoming president my senior year. I also did complete high school and earn my diploma. Just turn it off,
That's what I'm trying to do.
I'm projecting well enough.
Okay.
In 2009, I met my husband, Jeff, and he moved me away from all the toxicity. Honestly, I felt cured. I had some bad days, but without any prior treatment, I didn't really understand what I was going through, and I honestly thought it was just part of my personality because of my childhood. During our relationship, I did go to college and earned 2 degrees in agriculture and graduated with 3.9 GPA. Jeff proposed just before my graduation. At that time, I chose to go no contact with my mother to protect my husband and our future family from toxicity. I knew I wanted this new chapter of my life to be free from her. And we married in November of 2013. Now, just 1 month prior, we found out we were expecting our first child. This pregnancy was extremely difficult on me and my body. It affected my mental health, and looking back, I probably should have got treatment then. But in 2014, we welcomed Addison May into our lives. Very healthy, perfect little girl. Just 2 short months later, I hit a brick wall that was in the back of my mind, but I didn't realize I was going to crash that hard. My OB, my husband, and myself all believed it was postpartum depression. My doctor treated me as such by prescribing me my first antidepressant at the age of 24. During this time, I was afraid to tell people I was seeking help. I put a stigma on myself. I was newly married with a healthy baby girl. Why the hell would I be depressed? As most moms were actually doing in 2014, I started a blog, and one day I made a vulnerable post about my struggles, and to my surprise, I got a huge response of positive words and supportive words, but I also got a lot of me too, and I wish I was that strong to share. From then on, I knew I had to openly share my journey through my blog and social media. Life was about to throw me another curveball when I became pregnant again when Addison was 6 months old. I immediately stopped any treatment. I was struggling mentally, but I was trying to hide it. I remember very vividly sitting my innocent baby girl down in front of me and telling her that I didn't want her. I didn't want this baby. I didn't want this life. I was fulfilling all of her needs, but I felt like I couldn't emotionally connect to this new life. Obviously, I didn't have a great role model to show me what to do. However, in August of 2015, we welcomed our sweet Cooper David into this world. So our children are 14 months apart. Addison was not walking yet when Cooper was born. So now I'm a stay-at-home mom raising 2 babies. That in itself was a lot to take on. My OB did put me back on my antidepressant, but with 2 babies, I couldn't remember to take it. And everyone could see my mental health declining, but I'm a mom. I don't have time for that right now. Finally, in May of 2016, my OB started to think that this was maybe more than postpartum depression, and she referred me to a mental health facility. They did an assessment, which did in fact say, I need to see a psychiatrist, but they put me on a waiting list for 6 to 8 weeks. After that 8 weeks, I spent 4 weeks calling, only to find out that the person who assessed me in May retired and closed my case. They scheduled me for another appointment for what I thought was with the psychiatrist, but it was yet another assessment, and I was put on an 8 to 12 week waiting list at that point. I felt defeated and angry with the system. I started to do my own research and found a psychiatrist with an independent office who took me the very next week. I knew waiting wasn't an option for me. I had a husband and 2 babies. Suicidal ideation was not okay. He did diagnose me with severe anxiety disorder and major depression disorder. It may have been postpartum depression at the beginning, but it definitely was something more. He started me on an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety medication. However, within 2 weeks, that antidepressant caused suicidal thoughts and made things much worse. Yet he was on top of it, ready to start another one and another one. In 2017, I began therapy. This is the first time outside of my parents' divorce and as an adult that I went to therapy. I had a lot to unpack. So this first picture there, that was when I first went to my doctor. He was in Iowa City at that time, so I had quite a drive. And then this photo is actually the first few appointments I had with my therapist. She was like, okay, you have a lot going on. Give me a timeline from birth to 2017. It ended up being 3 pages, single-spaced, narrow margins. And sometimes we refer back to that list sometimes when we need to go back to it. But my therapist and I began to peel away the pieces of my childhood trauma and how it affected me as a mother and a wife. Later that year, my mother tried to make contact by mailing a package to her house. I was extremely triggered by this attempt. It caused panic attacks, nightmares, paranoia, and social anxiety. As a result, my psychiatrist diagnosed me with CPTSD. CPTSD is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is caused by trauma during a long period of time versus one event. Through a lot of trauma work, I found my voice. I've been silent since I was a child. I remember being told children are meant to be seen, not heard. Even though I found my voice, I didn't know how to control it. I began having rage episodes. That little girl inside of me who had been silenced was angry. That led my therapist to start treating me for borderline personality disorder. It can be very common with trauma, and I'm still learning all the proper coping techniques to use with these episodes. However, I'm aware and self-aware and am continuing to work on my trauma. I want you guys to look at these next 2 slides very carefully. My psychiatrist and I continued to chase treatment options, with one failing after another. I continued with the trial and error method for nearly 2 years, so we're now into 2018. I was feeling really defeated. That summer, he announced he was moving to a new facility farther away. I chose not to follow him, and I was not medicated when he left. That was mistake number 1. The following month, I decided therapy's not working either, so we're just gonna stop going to that. That was mistake number 2. I felt like I was in control and that obviously no treatment was gonna work for me. That was mistake number 3. After days of intense suicidal ideation, my husband drove me to the ER per my request in September of 2018. That picture right there is in the emergency room before they took my phone. I knew I didn't want to live anymore, but I knew I shouldn't feel like that. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline was available but not promoted like 988 is today, so I thought my only option was to go to the emergency room. When we arrived to the emergency room at noon, it was almost awkward to walk up to the receptionist, and when she asked me what I was there for, I said, I'd like to kill myself. She responded with, take a seat, someone will be with you shortly. After 5 hours, they put me in a small room for a Zoom call with a man who assessed my crisis. I don't remember all the questions he asked me, but one I remember very vividly. From a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to commit if we were to let you go? I answered without thinking twice, 8. From then on, I was left waiting for them to find me an open bed somewhere. After another 5 hours, I was transferred to a psych ward. They took everything from me except my underwear. After yet another assessment, I was given a toothbrush and shown my room. I sat on the edge of that bed and I cried. I have never cried that hard in my life. I was alone, truly alone. During that very long night, I had an epiphany. I was left in a dark room, stripped from my family and my belongings. I realized my death was not the answer. The next morning, a caseworker walked in, and she was the first person in 24 hours that actually listened to what I was saying. I explained to her how I felt before I came to the ER, how scared I was being in the ward, and the epiphany I had overnight. She knew being there was not going to help me heal. She asked me to call my husband and have him come in. We went into a small room where she explained to him that this was not a good place for me to get better, but that I could get better with the right aftercare plan. I knew I was going to do whatever it took to never go there again. I was scared straight. Losing my husband and my kids was never going to be worth it. I made appointments with both my therapist and psychiatrist within the week. They were both shocked at what had transpired. I explained everything to my therapist, but most importantly, the hospital stay itself. Yes, it had lit a fire in me, but I was definitely traumatized by what had occurred at the hospital and that needed to be addressed. I drove the 2 hours to my psychiatrist. So that first picture is from my drive. He is now in Cedar Rapids. And that second picture is Post-it notes that I still have on my mirror today that my therapist had me put on. So they're still there after 5 years. And that last picture I'm going to explain here in a minute. My psychiatrist and I had a long talk about what had been happening since I first started seeing him in 2016. He was noticing a couple patterns. One was an up and down motion, which is when he finally officially diagnosed me with bipolar type 2. Type 2 because of my lack of physical manic behavior. I'm more in the down than I am the up. And this means that my mania is normally called hypomania, which means my mind races, sometimes making it difficult for me to sleep for days. The other pattern he was noticing was my reaction to medication. It was very apparent that any antidepressant or antipsychotic medicine, was causing the opposite reaction, suicidal thoughts. We probably tried every medication on the market because within 1 to 2 weeks, I was having a reaction. He started me on 2 anticonvulsant medications that are commonly used for bipolar. He also increased my anti-anxiety and gave me a sleep aid, a total of 4 medications. So this is a quick photo I wanted to share. This is an event that was planned prior to anything, but it was so much more meaningful to go when I was just 2 weeks out of the hospital. This is the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention Out of the Darkness walk in Davenport, Iowa. It was probably, Nicole, 100 degrees in the shade that day, but it was amazing to have a whole team of people come and show up for me. We all had Team Mary shirts on, and it was really, really meaningful to me. So now for 5 years, I've stayed on top of my mental health by sticking to my aftercare plan. This is what works for me. I'm not going to say that this works for everybody. This is what works for me. Go to my psychiatrist. Take my medication. Go to therapy. Find a hobby or something to do to keep you busy. Leave the house often, even if it's for a small errand. And take time for yourself. I see my psychiatrist regularly, taking the same 4 medications after 5 years now. He recently just decided that he is okay with me doing yearly med checks. I have never gone more than 4 months without seeing him, so this is a very big deal. I also see my therapist weekly, continuing to work on my trauma. I am by no means cured of my mental illnesses, and I never will be. They are a life sentence. I understand that sounds bad, but I have come to terms with that. I have embraced them for making me the person I am today. That first picture is from Nashville. I have started taking mommy trips, as you could say, trips by myself since I've been in my recovery. And then also, as Maggie mentioned before, the random person that was donating is for my business that I started about a year out of the hospital. So some of the things that joyful things I've done since I've been out of the hospital. It can be really difficult as a young mother to have these issues, but I am open and honest with my kids. They understand the importance of their mental health and what suicide prevention means. You can see in that first picture, they're wearing their Team Mommy shirts at one of our Out of the Darkness walks. I want them to know that my illness and trauma are not their fault. And when they grow up, they know despite every battle I faced, I did my best to raise them the best of my abilities. The last picture is a recently when I did a podcast with Drew Williams to share my story, which isn't the first time that I've shared my story on podcast or publicly. I've spent 5 years in recovery advocating for mental health and suicide prevention. I've helped others advocate. I started sharing my journey on a blog, and now NAMI Sauk Area has given me a new platform to share my story through In Our Own Voice program and other media outlets. NAMI Sauk Area has given me a new purpose in life by helping others through their mental health journeys through education, support, and advocacy. The rest is yet to be written. My story is not over. Thank you so much for letting me share.